Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to another property-based podcast in the series where you'll often find Hamish McClay sitting there being very much part of the show and promoting great ideas. Today's podcast is called Property Matters, and our special guest is Melissa White of Kindstay. So welcome to the show, Melissa. Before we get into it, you should understand what today's proposition is. It is living through disruption, something that Melissa knows only too painfully well. But to start us off, Hamish McClay.
Good afternoon to all. I do trust all is well for you. We have a challenging situation arising. It's not new to a lot of people, but when you think back, the 20s itself has been, for many people, quite a harrowing time. We had, first of all, the lockdown, so many people were incarcerated. We fortunately it wasn't as serious here as it was in China, as an example. However, it caused so much disruption to the health of many people, the mental sort of implications, as well as, because when you actually sort of think those things you've been doing for a large number of years, all of a sudden they stop. And then you've got the children. So there was an awful lot of interference in how people might just generally live their lives. And it was a very big challenge. And many people still haven't recovered from that. And we've noticed a change in attitude from many people. Now, followed by that, we have other situations which haven't necessarily been brought about by governmental forces, but it's almost been sort of permitted. And we've actually sort of found that the awareness, we found out about Grenfell and the damaging impact that could have. It's certainly impacted on so many families, so many lives, and they're never going to be the same again. But what we've got is an ongoing situation where people find themselves in properties where remediation is going on. There's a serious impact. Not all of this occurs, but there's certain ones where there's a shroud, you can't even see through that shroud. I think that our friend sort of Steve, who joins us for the subject of cladding matters, I think his is a sort of semi-see-through type shroud that they have on it. But you've got all the scaffolding, all the noise from people, really living in that kind of environment. And it's not as though for a couple of weeks, it's not a couple of months. In many respects, it's a couple of years. So what does that do to families? What does that do to individuals? We've got that serious aspect. And then we've also got the aspect added to that of those people who've had to be decanted from their homes because they're too dangerous. And that is happening all the time. There's a lot of impact on that health, and there's a lot of government decisions which will help that situation along. But while all that's happening, something is being overlooked, and very few people are taking the interest they should in the health of those people who find themselves in difficult situations. And this is really the sort of kind of work that Melissa is working at, sort of introducing and working with many people. Let Melissa introduce what it is that basically goes on in her world and the people that she's actually trying to help.
Thank you very much for joining the show, Melissa. Kindstay, what exactly, let's start from the beginning. Why did you feel it needed to exist? And also, what is the direction it's taking now? And what is your vision for the future for it?
Oh, I'll try to remember the answers to all those questions. Gareth. You'll have to remind me if I don't answer them. But thank you so much for having me.
Why did Kindstay need to exist?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I've been working for the last few years, almost 4 years now, with leaseholders and homeowners in that space. And so it was while I was going through my own decant, and that's an evacuation because we're needing to remediate the internal structure of the building, not the external, which is what most buildings have to do with their cladding. And it was just seeing the way residents were treated, the lack of information transparency, the many gaps that occurred in my own process. And whilst everybody was focusing on where they were going to live, I was busy hatching the plan that was Kindstay.
Okay, so that explains the impetus why it is. So what's its mission?
Its mission is to help stabilize residents during housing disruption. So regardless of so initially I set out to ensure that there was better transparency within the remediations, but mostly I care deeply about well-being and mindset. And if we're not feeling strong or safe in our homes, we can't work, we can't function properly in society, our health, our physiological health suffers. So over the last few years, I had been more involved in the well-being and mindset space. And it was almost like a coming together of both my housing experience and from a resident's perspective and the well-being part. And I thought, how can buildings be fixed and remediated and all the focus be on fixing the external components whilst breaking resident well-being? Like, that just makes no logical sense.
I mean, there seems to be the point where they suddenly realize that the building's not fit for human habitation, and it's like, everyone out. Mm-hmm. At what point do Kindstay step in?
Right, really good question. Initially, a lot of the market right now in the industry is very reactive, but the reality is there are indicators that buildings need work quite early on, and there's a big gap between when residents are told they have to evacuate and when different surveys or discussions are being had from fire safety engineers, et cetera, who are analyzing what's wrong with the building in the first place. So right. whilst those things are going on, residents are kind of in the dark, and you can see that the building teams, their expertise are in the technical building, on the ground construction. And so they aren't equipped to handle the many questions and the barrage of noise that sometimes can come from residents when they don't know what's going on, right? So I think that what I've seen is that residents are told as late as possible that they need to leave.
Yes.
So if you're talking about the evacuation, and that's because they don't want to create fear or uncertainty. But whilst they're doing that, people know that there's something going on. They know that, people are knocking through the walls, and there are workmen coming in and out, and surveys are being done. So what I'm doing presently is working with the construction teams to engage with residents earlier, capture important information to make sure that their data and any of their special requirements, some of the PEEPs information, so that come around with any vulnerabilities they have, those are captured up front. And in doing so, in case that there's an evacuation or a remediation, which most developers will know earlier on, then at least you have all of the necessary information to be able to place those residents and to get their cooperation rather than operating blindly. And I'll give you a really important example. We were given a week to evacuate, and then that was extended by a few weeks because they just had no accommodation available for us. It was a big mess. But while that was going on, residents were refusing to leave. They were saying, we're not leaving. We're not going to engage. And you can understand they're not being difficult, but they're feeling unsafe. And so fast forward, when this happened, we were evacuated in July. It's now February, and not everybody has signed the necessary documentation for the developers to access their flats. I don't know if all of the belongings have been moved out. So you need resident cooperation in order to do surveys, etc. So you have to bring them on in the journey. And what I'm saying is there's a way to do it in a structured way that helps stabilize residents to get better outcomes for everybody.
So at what point in the cycle and the process do Kind Stay get called in? And more importantly, who does the calling? Is it the resident? Is it the builder? Who interacts with you?
Yeah, so it would be, so I've been approached by either management companies that are project managing the remediation,
right,
or the consultants who are project managing the remediation because they see value in providing the well-being hub. So originally, Kind Stay set out, and we have a portal for residents that have a well-being hub. They can access various tools, and we also do outreach to keep in touch with the residents, to check in on them, to make sure they're okay. But the reality is nobody will access any tools if you don't have physiological and psychological safety. If you're in this fight or flight stage, you're not going to access a free gym membership or go in, to a co-working space. You couldn't care less about a meditation class. You first need to be communicated with effectively. You need to know what's going on. You need to be treated with dignity and respect in order to be able to get to that next point. So
hang on. So you're saying that nowadays it tends to be whatever, but it was originally intended for residents to be able to call you guys in, right?
No, I always wanted the organizations to be able to say, this is our obligation. We're spending millions on remediating buildings.
Right.
Let's pay a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage towards and when I say a tiny percentage, like £10 a month per resident, right? In order to access tools. We're talking about buildings that are,
but it sounds well worth
millions.
It. For a relatively low downspend, they're getting the buy-in of the residents, which means it's more likely for them to be able to move forward. I mean, part of the issue, as you've just highlighted there, is if the residents don't give all the relevant permissions and sign all the relevant paperwork, then how can remediation take place anyway? And making them feel a bit more heard, supported, and psychologically in a good place is more likely to get compliance. Am I on the right track?
You're totally on the right track, except that's what the platform was designed. That's the easy, we could upload or onboard hundreds of thousands of residents onto the platform. But then we saw, actually, we need to step back. We need to go in. There needs to be a consultation period.
Right.
Before any of that onboarding, before the decanting, so that you're capturing the information. So now we're using frameworks to capture the resident data, to communicate with them in a structured way, and ensure that the developers have everything in place so that they can even plan. They may not even know yet if a full decant needs to happen. This is helping them kind of tick more boxes and do things the right way.
I almost think that the word decant is a euphemism because it makes it sound like a nice, ordered, gentle thing, whereas it's not. It's Hamish, it seems to me that this sort of service is not so much needed; it's intrinsic to the safe passage.
Absolutely, we seem to have it's almost part of the culture in this country that you don't let anybody know about things. You keep it hidden.
Yes.
What's exactly going on? And we know this from a government perspective. And then all of a sudden you leap. Or you will have actually, like we had last year with the government, they leaked purposely certain aspects of what was going to be contained within their budget, just to frighten people almost into be able to coming out with a load of what resulted in garbage, really, stuff that's not going to help anybody at all. And I think various things like when they all sorts of things were going to be done. And one of the things is, of course, Melissa's working with people trapped up in this situation. The idea of improving leasehold, how they were going to go about that, but it frightens the living daylights out of certain people who've got those investments.
Yes.
And if that's actually just sprung on them, but I mean, it's been kicked down the road. Something was meant to happen. It's going to be kicked down the road. Now, whether it comes in suddenly, we're not going to know about that. But it's these people we want to protect who are put in a position that they're thinking about this all the time. Is it going to happen? Sort of, will it happen? Because these little stories that are filtering through that somebody knows and somebody doesn't know and somebody finds out and you sort of, oh, is this some kind of conspiracy theory? Whereas if people are prepared, it's like anything else. You look at education, not that I agree with what goes on in education these days, but children are made aware of the fact, and students when they get into their senior schools, they're made aware of the fact that there is an examination coming up. You don't all of a sudden say to somebody one day, oh, you've got a GCE tomorrow. It's a GCSE. You don't just drop it on them.
No.
You prepare them for it. And hopefully, I think this is one of the saddest things, what they do is they don't prepare children psychologically for those exams. They prepare them purely academically. Nothing goes on about, because it frightens the living daylights out of some people.
It did me. And the thing is, I think perhaps what Melissa and your team are doing here is helping prepare people in advance. But there is a culture of waiting until the last possible second before you drop it like a ton of bricks. Surely, Melissa, that not only has to change, but with it becoming more and more visible, that these things are happening. I don't think most of the population knew that this decanting nonsense was happening fairly regularly, and given the amount of flats, Hamish, that are still in that list to be discovered and dealt with, it's not something that's going away anytime soon, would you say, Melissa?
So firstly, I think that's such a great analogy, Hamish, and your points also, Gareth, on this. When it's left the last minute, and I hadn't really thought of it from a cultural perspective, so this is why I love these conversations. The experts that are informing me, so it's not just me coming out here and creating this. I know how to help manage mindset, focus on goals, move towards it, right? So I've been involved in performance coaching, etc. I have neuroscientists, behavioral experts who know and specialize in how to keep people calm, how to move from heightened to calm, how to ensure that they're, and one of you made an excellent point. I think that when you're filling in the gaps, our brains naturally look for evidence so we can feel safe. If we suspect something's coming up, but we're not sure, let's take another analogy. If you have a partner and they're lying to you about something, and then all of a sudden you start filling in the gaps and you've created these big stories that you haven't validated, you don't know 100% for sure, but because you don't have all the information and somebody's acting a little bit off, we naturally can sense that. We pick up on that.
Well, of course.
Fast forward to people on your building site. You've heard rumors that it could be this or it could be that, and there's no clear communication. It's natural that people are going to start filling in the blanks, and we will always go to the worst case scenario because, again, if we can predict the worst case, it somehow makes us feel a little bit safer than the worst case just being thrown at us. And so it's using these. It's really interesting. I have I've recently connected, and I was invited to the University of South Wales and their psychology unit. And the head of psychology, their team there are really interested in, I want validation on this. I want science and research to validate that if you do things in the right way for humans, the residents, then, and you, in order to keep them safe and etc., then naturally the programs will benefit. You'll save money, you'll save time, you'll have less burnout from people on the ground who are dealing with the stress and anxiety from residents. Did Gareth freeze, or is he just?
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's like a perfect picture.
I see. It was great, wasn't it?
We're dealing, Melissa, you have to understand, we're dealing with the iniquities of the modern data network. And I used to be a networking engineer for Cisco, and it amazes me it ever works at all. But
You're back.
No, I'm back. Okay, look, Melissa, I personally think that the service you're offering is something that I'm amazed it hasn't been there before. There's been many occasions where we've had foreseeable disasters and people had no preparation and had to evacuate their homes before you came up with this brilliant idea. Hamish McClay, it seems to me that not only is this necessary, that the demand for this kind of service will only increase.
But I think what we can say is, and speak to Steve about this, it's become evident, and also many of the people, the statisticians, there's Matt Hedges Long, is it?
Yes, Hodges Long, yeah.
He keeps incredible sort of figures on this, and it's constantly growing, the number of people who are being moved from their premises to something else, which could be short-term temporary, could be long-term temporary, without any sort of preparation for it. And that all links up with, I was listening to a sort of political debate the other day there, and one of the contributors was turning around that we would expect, one of the great things about being British, your home's your castle. You should be safe in that particular sort of environment. And we have the situation now, various reforms being conjured up by people who by and large are not living in these places. And whether it be leasehold reform, rental reform, all the rest of these things, they're not in that living in that environment, but they're making decisions about it. And the last people they seem to contemplate are those people who are directly involved, because to them it has the greatest impact. And surely we, with our knowledge now that we have today of the mind, helping people with their mindset and mindfulness, it should be open to everybody. But it's far better if there's something approaching. It's like if you're in a tunnel and there's a train coming towards you, they hoot. So it doesn't just hit you, they advise you that it's going to happen. So you're prepared, so you can step out of the way and you can just calmly watch it as it passes by, or whatever else. But you're aware of it, and being aware of something enables you to settle your mind. And sometimes, if you don't have any help with that, and it's just fragmented, you need somebody like Melissa and what Kind Stay are doing to help people through that particular environment. And it's absolutely essential, I think, to prepare.
So sorry. I thought you were finished. I just really wanted to say that a really important, so the evacuations are the small percentage. And yes, so Matt Hodges Long is tracking that too. But one thing that I wanted to highlight is that that's worst case scenario. My goal and my intention is the people who are living with the scaffolding around them and the loud noise and the banging and the true disruption to their daily lives, they need the support that is just making sure that they have access to other locations that maybe they can go in and work from, or go to the gym, or kids play, etc. They need opportunities to exercise and get out of the flats, because there's no light, there's constant noise, there's men walking around constantly, which is an invasion of privacy. So I think that though we should be talking about and acknowledging the difficulties for residents that must move, I would say the many, many more that are truly living through the disruptive noise and the disruption, they need support too. And so I just wanted to say that. Sorry for that's really important to me.
Hamish, I think we've come to the end of our time here. Would you care to wrap up and take us home?
Well, absolutely right. And I mean, it's a really pleasure to have Melissa here, because what we've had previously, it's almost like the building itself, don't we? We have a wall, and we have an inside and an outside, and that wall separates. What we've got is a situation here. There's people living inside. There's people outside trying to do. What Kindly Stay are that link between the two things that are going on. And that is so vastly important, because if we're informed and if we are aware of solutions, because of the experience and the background of others who have been involved in that, and Melissa can bring that in, and Kind Stay can bring that level of expertise into the situation that people do find themselves, because it must have been ghastly for the likes of Steve, for example. You hear it right from the base ground. I can't remember what floor he's on, but they're putting up the scaffold. There's the noise of the clank, 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 the shout, 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 shout. And up it comes, up it comes. It's getting closer to you. It's getting closer to you. And then all of a sudden, you've got that scaffolding. If you've had somebody if there is that link between the outside and the inside, it's the customer service type approach in a way, looking at it very simply. Perhaps somebody can go and speak to the residents and say to the residents directly, from the management company, from the person who's responsible for the realm, hey, this is what's going on. But that's the kind of intervention that Melissa's speaking about. We want people outside to be able to link up and work comfortably with people inside.
I'm an autistic, ADHD, dyslexic gentleman, or as my wife calls it, the full dance card. And I find change particularly difficult. And I know that neurodivergent or neurotypical people really don't like it when suddenly the rug is pulled from under their feet and they've got to cope with the new normal. And what you provide, Melissa, I think is something that is, as I said before, I think intrinsic to certainly modern living, especially living in places that were perhaps less than aptly put up in the first place. And we're now only finding once we take their petticoats off that they have dirty underwear underneath. In other words, all the various different things are coming to. We pull off all that cladding only to find the stuff wasn't as aptly put together as we thought it might was. Amazing, really, really, absolutely intrinsic, as I said, to modern living. Thank you for appearing on the show today, Melissa, and we hope you'll come back some point and tell us a bit more stories from the edge, perhaps. And Hamish McClay, thanks once again for putting on an excellent show. And to all of you out there watching, this is the tip of the iceberg. Hamish and I have committed to trying to find out the different ways in which you can be supported. We'll find more and more of them appearing on Property Matters over time. Please don't forget that we have 3 other shows for you to dip your toes in. Tomorrow, we have the excellent Ipsa Kind of Magic, the Association of Independent Personal Search Agents, of which Hamish is the current chairman, and we talk about all things search and all things that affect Ipsa members. If you are a conveyancer or if you are a search agent, you might find that very intriguing. In fact, we found that 90% of the people who watch our show on that day are nothing to do with it, but they all seem to find it very interesting. We also have on Thursday, what I arguably is our flagship, which is a Property Quorum, where we get together people who are property specialists in different fields, and we have a bit of a discussion, often a bun fight. I try and keep order. It sounds great fun. It is. Please do come along for that. That's at 10 o'clock on Thursday. And on Friday, the thing that gets us by far and away the most views, I think it was last week or the week before, we achieved over 18,000 views. And that is cladding matters. And that is discussing not just cladding, but things that happen when you look hard and long at property building and its and whether or not it's been done quite up to snuff, and what can be done to remediate it. And of course, Melissa is a direct effect of all that, because she is trying to mitigate the horrendousness of what happens when a place needs to be remediated and everybody gone. But do please make sure you put them in your diary. Thank you once again, Melissa. Thank you, Hamish. And to all of you watching, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and if possible, look after that mental health. Until next time, bye-bye.